Hey folks, welcome back. So I got a request for a rewind time style mechanic, so this is what we'll be setting up for this one. Pretty cool, right? It's pretty fun. So let's jump into it. It's actually not too difficult. So I have a clean project set up right here. I've done nothing to this one yet. First thing I'm going to do, just so I don't blow y'all's ears out or whatever, I'm gonna change this sound spawn to 0.1, just so it's not pew pew the whole time. Now in our blueprints folder, first thing we want to do is we want to create a blueprint. Right click, go to blueprints, and we want to create a blueprint interface. I'm gonna call it time control underscore BPI. Double click to open that up, and we want to set the first function to rewind. Then we want to add one more and call it forward. Then we'll compile that, and that's pretty much all we need from it. So in our first person character, we want to go to class settings, interfaces, and add that time control interface. So now what we will do is at the bottom of, we want to keep our, if you're doing this in first person, I'm doing this one in first person just because it comes with the projectile automatically, but it should work for any. So I'm going to add an event on right mouse button. I'm going to add a branch with a B and a left click. I'm going to drag off the condition, promote that to a variable called can rewind time ? Because if you're familiar with the spell tutorials I do, I like to cushion it in with that. So if they can, which you want to make sure that's defaulted to true, then we want to get all actors with interface. Actually, we need to add a variable of a boolean and call it rewinding. And we'll set that to true. And then we will get all actors with interface, make sure it's the time control. Then off the out actors, we'll do a for each loop, plug that in. And then for the array element, we want to get the rewind message and plug that into the loop body so that every single actor that has this interface, it'll call this function. And on released, we want to do a branch, find out if we've clicked this, because if for some reason you've set it up to where they can't rewind time and they release this, you don't want it to activate all this. But if they are rewinding, then we will stop them from rewinding. We'll Control C, Control V to copy that, paste it in underneath it, kind of line it up, and then from the array element we'll call the other one forward. So we'll just box select all that, commented it out as time control buttons. So compile that, and then out here in our blueprints folder again, you want to right click, create a blueprint class of an actor, and we'll just, call it cube, because I'm going to set it up with a cube. It'll work with any mesh though. So I'm going to double click and open that up, add a component of a static mesh. I'm going to rename that to be mesh. Compile. Class settings up in your toolbar. You want to add that time control interface. Compile that. Now in its class defaults, with the mesh selected, you want to make sure it's set to movable. Oh, helps if we want to set the static mesh. For this one's going to be a cube. I'm going to just drag it up, make sure it's sitting right on that grid. So we'll click simulate physics, then we'll compile that. Now in the event graph, we want to get rid of all this, compile. I want to right click and do event rewind. We'll add a variable called rewinding ? And on our event rewind, we want to set that to true. Then we'll do event forward. Grab that same variable, Control-C, Control-V if you want to, or just drag out another copy and set it to false. So we'll compile that up. Then we're going to add an event tick. Add a branch. Oh, actually S and left click, because we're going to need a sequence. Because we're going to need to get the actor's location, or the transform of the actor, and its velocity. So hook that up. From then 0, we'll find out if we are rewinding. And if not, we want to drag out our mesh, get world transform. If they're not lining up, you can box select and hit Q on the keyboard and it'll line them up a little bit better. From the return value, we will add array add, hook that to false, and then we will drag off this array element and promote that to a variable called actor transforms. So now we want to drag our, if they are rewinding, we want to get the actor transforms, get a copy, drag off again, get last index. From the last index, we want to find out if it's greater than 0. Because if it's not, we don't want it to be trying to rewind any further than the very first point that it has. So I'll drag this back, add a branch. I think I got that out a little too early. So we need the last index right now. We'll hook that in right there, and if hook true to this, and if it is greater than 0, then we want to drag out our mesh one more time, and we will set set world transform. Now we will drag out, you know what, let's drag another one out just to make it prettier. Get actor transforms, get a copy, hook that here, and then we want to find the last index and hook that to the one that we're getting. So if it's greater than 0, we'll hook this to true so that we update our actor's transform to the last index that it has. So after this, we will add another branch. I'm going to drag that in place. Drag out the actor transforms one more time. Actually delete that because we can just copy this. We want to drag off the last index, make sure it's bigger than 0, and if it is, then we want to remove index. And the index that we want to remove is the last one. So we'll just kind of pretty this up just a little bit. That'll be fine. I'm going to box select all this. Let's kind of move it, give us a little bit more room, because if they're rewinding and the last index is not greater than 0, but it is 0, then we want to copy the set world transform, copy it, paste it down here, like so. Drag off one more actor transforms, get a copy, drag this back a little bit, last index. Basically the same thing as the other one, we just don't want to remove the index this time. So I'm gonna set all this in place, just kind of pretty it up a little bit with reroute nodes and whatnot. Now what we want to do in order to get that actor's velocity and make sure that when we release it doesn't just fall out of the sky, because if we look at it right now, I'll drag out some cubes. right now, it'll just kind of go around real funky. We want to get a record of what its velocity was at each point. So back in its blueprint, we will copy this, Control C, Control V, hook it to then 1. So we'll duplicate our actor transforms and call it actor velocity. Compile that. And just like up here, we want to drag out the mesh, get its linear velocity. And if we're not rewinding, we want to get the linear velocity. And off of that, we want to get its angular velocity in degrees. That's a set, that's not bad. You want to get angular velocity in degrees. Then we want to drag this out, the velocities, add to the array. Now from here we will make this transform. We want to hook the get linear velocity to the location and the angular velocity to the scale. And then we will hook that directly to there. Then we'll box select, move all that down, box select, move that down a little bit too. So if they are rewinding, we want to get the velocity and find out last index, just like last time, if it's greater than 0. So we will hook that up just like that, and drop it down, kind of line it up because my OCD messes with me. And if they're rewinding and the index is greater than 0, then we want to copy our mesh, bring it up. We want to set its physics linear velocity. So true. We'll drag this out, get a copy, drag off one more time from actor velocity, get the last index, because this will be the very last one that it recently added. And we will break this transform, because we want to hook the location into the linear velocity. I'm going to drag this over a little bit, and then set its angular velocity in degrees. You can double click and add reroute nodes if you need to, then box select and Q to line them up if that's what you like. Hook the scale to the new angular velocity. Do a branch at the end. Get the velocity again. Last index, just like last time. And we will find out if it is greater than 0. Because if it is, then we want to drag this down a little bit and remove index of the last index and hook that to true. So what this is all doing is it's going to measure its velocity at each point when you're not rewinding and add it to an array. Then when you are rewinding, it'll find the very last one that it had and apply that to our cube and rewind it back, and then remove that index so that the next time it fires through, it goes back previous. Same thing with the location. So it looks complicated, but it's really not. So let's take a look at it now. Sorry about that. Somebody's shooting. So now you can just kind of rewind it, and there you go. Now what fun is it to have it just apply to static meshes? Oh, while we're on static meshes though, to add more static meshes instead of having to go through all that process again, you can right click, duplicate. I'm going to call this one cone_BP. And all you got to do, just go to the mesh, change it to your new mesh, make sure it's lined up on the ground so that it's not floating. I'm going to drag out a few of those. So now you can rewind it at will. So you can stack them up. And everything rewinds. Now let's say you want to do the same thing with an enemy. There's just a few changes you have to make. So we'll right click, create a blueprint class of a character this time. Call it enemy cube underscore BP. And I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to add a static mesh. This will work with the skeletal meshes, but I'm just going to set that like that, compile it up. Then from our cube, we can just... Oh, wait. One thing we need to do in here is go to our class settings and make sure we add that time control BPI. So now we can go to our cube and take all of it. Control C. Go to enemy cube in the event graph. I'm going to delete this for now. And Control V. Now one thing we're going to need to do is kind of alter it just a little bit. So I'm going to delete that. Wherever we have booleans like this, we're going to right click, create the variable, and it'll automatically create the variable for us. So I'm going to right click, create variable. For that, I'm going to delete that because we're going to have to do a little bit different. And create variable, delete that, take a look around, delete that, delete. Oh, actually, delete the set world transform because we're going to need a different one for this one. That's looking good. So now we'll compile, and what we need to do is... we will delete the get world transform too. So what we'll do is, instead of getting just one of these, we'll get a reference to our self, which is just the blueprint. Get transform. You want to get actor transform. And then do the same thing right there. And we will set actor transform. Actor being self is fine. Set actor transform on true. We'll drag this back and hook it to our new transform. Hook that up like that. Compile that just to make sure there's no errors in the top half. Looks like we're good. Now what we want to do is drag out our character movement and hook it to the target. It'll add in this updated primitive, and that's what you want. And then hook that to both of those. Control C to grab that. Paste it up. And hook it to both of those. Compile. And that should be all it takes. So just to make sure, we'll put an event begin play. Because on event begin play, we want to AI move to. We want it to start chasing our character. So we'll hook that up. For the pawn, we'll just get a reference to self. And the target actor will get player character. On success and on fail, we'll do a short delay. And then just recall this AI move to, just to make sure. Now I don't want it sprinting after, so I'm going to change its walk speed. So character movement, general setting, no wait, walking. I'm going to set it to about 300 just so it doesn't get to you immediately. Oh, volumes, you're going to have to add in a nav mesh bounds volume. I'm going to set its scale to 30 by 30. And then add the enemy cube. So now we play, he'll be chasing us. I press the button and he rewinds. I don't know what happened there. Okay, let's... What is happening? Okay, maybe I need to lift those up a little bit. Yeah, it looks like they're... Maybe it's just the problem with the way I have them stacked. It looks like every time I press play, yeah, they kind of wobble. Let's rewind that. Okay, let's see what's happening here. So if it's not greater than 0, then we want to set it to the last index. Maybe I'll just take those down. Those look like they're floating. I must not have dropped it all the way. I didn't. So I'll compile that. And he's backing up. So now it applies to the enemies too. Good deal. Let's try this one more time. So all that's working. So now, let's say you want to also have it affect your player. Just a few more minor alterations we need to do, but what we are going to do is grab all this from our enemy cube. That'll minimize what we gotta do. So, Control C to copy all that, and in our first person character, we'll add it in. Compile that. Remember, you gotta go through, right wherever it says error, you need to right click and create variable. Create variable. Create variable. So now, when I run around, it does nothing because I forgot to also grab our blueprint interface commands, because those are important. So I'll just hook those up right there. And now I zip backwards through time as well. Pretty cool, right? Now you notice I still have control of the camera, but there is something we can do to make it to where the camera also goes back in time. So we'll drop this down a little bit. We're going to add one more to our sequence, and then we just need to repeat this one more time. We'll duplicate and call it actor rotations. We'll change this to a rotator array, compile, and then we'll copy this and hook it to that, then 2. So we'll come down. Now we want to drag out our first person camera below, I guess. Get rotation. Get world rotation. And we will add to the array that we just created. So get that, add it to it. Boom. If we're not rewinding, we want to add our rotations to an array. If we are rewinding, then we want to get that actor rotation, drag off, get the last index, find out if that last index's number is greater than 0, because arrays start at 0, so the very first one will be 0, which we don't want to try to go back before that. And if it is, then drag out one more time, we'll get a copy of that, of the last index, plug that in like that, first person camera, and we will set rotation, and we want to set the world rotation, and hook that to there. True. Now let's just copy all that real quick and paste it to the false. and we will change one thing on here. We can copy this and the branch, bring it to the end of the true line, paste it, move this up, and if it's still greater than 0, then we will do a remove index, get the last index that we added, and then remove it. Oh, box select everything. There's one more thing we need to do. So off of the true, then we want to set use pawn control rotation, and we want to set that to false. So when we're rewinding, we don't want to use the pawn control rotation, otherwise that'll allow our mouse to dictate where the camera is going to aim. So we disable that here. Actually, you know what? Let's move that. That way we only got to put one. So we'll just copy the first person camera and the set pawn control rotation. Box select all this, move it back a little bit, Control V to paste it in, and we'll just, every time they are rewinding, it'll automatically. Otherwise you gotta do it on the false too, so this is just easier way. Make sure we hook the true back to the set world rotation. And then on false, we'll grab that one more time, we'll set it to true, drag our camera down a little bit so that we can hook that like that, and compile. So now, when we run through, it updates my camera to where it was too. Whoa. There's a little bit of snapping. But you could probably update that with like a find where it was and set it back to where, yeah. But other than that, that's all the things necessary for rewind time. Now if you want to set it to where sometimes it affects your character and sometimes it doesn't, you can just add a branch right here, drag off the condition, promote that to a variable called affects player ? And if true, it'll do all this, and if not, it won't. So I can now disable that, and boom, and now everything is affected except the player. So good deal. Fun, right? And not too complicated. So yeah, hope y'all enjoyed it, and if y'all have any more requests, feel free to give me a shout. Later.